Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one. The introduction. In the quiet town of Maplewood, a place often described as a forgotten slice of Americana, life moved at a languid pace. Oak trees lined the main street, where children played freely, and neighbors exchanged casual greeting. Yet, behind the idyllic facade lay a dark secret, one that would soon shatter the calmness that enveloped this community. It was an unremarkable Tuesday when the first sign of trouble emerged. At 7:00 a.m., the local postman, Ted Lawson, made his usual rounds, delivering letters and parcels with little thought to the drama that was brewing. As he approached the old Watson house, something caught his eye. A car, parked low and awkwardly on the driveway, dust gathering on its hood, despite the otherwise polished neighborhood. The Watsons had long been dormant in the social fabric, their appearances at community events dwindling over the years. His curiosity piqued, Ted leaned against his mail truck, squinting through the early morning sunlight. An uneasy feeling crept into his gut. He quickly dismissed it, attributing the stillness to the usual morning routine, but he couldn't shake it off entirely. It was peculiar, even for the Watsons, who were known for seclusion. Hours passed, and with the sun now high in the sky, Ted's unease morphed into concern. The car remained silent and unmoving. Sensing that something was amiss, he decided to report it to the Maplewood Police Department. Little did he know this simple act would spiral into a complex investigation that would unravel the very fabric of Maplewood, exposing layers of betrayal, hidden lives, and unspeakable truths. As the police began to gather evidence, the town's facade would soon crumble, revealing that beneath the tranquility of Maplewood lay something far more sinister. The victim. The following day, the call came through to the Maplewood police station, a disturbance at the Watson residence. Officer Jenna Reed, a seasoned investigator with a keen eye for detail, arrived at the scene, her instincts immediately heightened by the palpable air of anxiety surrounding the house. As she crossed the threshold, the scent of stale air and dust filled her lungs. Evidence that time had stopped in this once vibrant home. In the dim light of the living room, she encountered the lifeless body of Lila Watson, sprawled on the floor as though she had simply collapsed in the middle of her everyday routine. A modest woman in her early 50s, Lila had always been considered a fixture in the community, if only from a distance. Her life had revolved around her husband, Frank, and their 2 children, who had long since flown the nest. As Jenna carefully examined Lila's body, she noted an unsettling detail: the bruises around her wrists, suggesting a struggle or a desperate attempt to escape. But it wasn't just the physical marks that sparked concern. Lila's expression was frozen in a mix of fear and confusion. It was as if she had been caught in a moment of realization about a truth far darker than she had anticipated. Officer Reed's mind raced as she took in the surroundings. Framed family photographs adorned the walls, and her eyes glowing with warmth. Here was a woman who had once brought joy to the community, hosting bake sales and leading neighborhood watch meetings. But as Jenna continued her investigation, it became increasingly clear that the real Lila was hidden behind a veil of secrets, fears, and unspoken burden. Retrieving her notebook, Jenna jotted down the details methodically, while her thoughts spiraled into the questions that would soon dominate this case. Who had wanted to harm Lila Watson? And what reasons lay beneath the surface of this tragedy? With every unanswered question, the complexity of the investigation deepened, hinting at a world that few could imagine, a world where trust could slip away like sand through fingers. The crime scene. The afternoon sun filtered through the dusty windows of the Watson living room as Officer Jenna Reed meticulously documented the crime scene. The somber atmosphere was punctuated by the rustling of evidence bags and the low murmurs of the forensics team as they collected samples. The blood spatter on the worn wooden floor told its own harrowing story, a narrative that was beginning to unfold with each detail discovered. Jenna's gaze swept across the room. Devoid of chaos, it bore the unmistakable signs of an ordinary life interrupted. A half-finished cup of coffee sat untouched on the kitchen counter, and a laundry basket overflowed with folded clothes awaiting attention. It was eerily silent, yet Jenna felt the weight of unspoken chaos lurking beneath the surface, ready to erupt. As she moved deeper into the house, her attention was drawn to the studyan, unassuming room, adorned with bookshelves filled with novels and a desk cluttered with papers. Among the files was an assortment of family-related documents, but under one pile lay a disturbing find, a sealed envelope marked, "Do not open." Its presence raised a red flag in Jenna's mind. What was Lila hiding? Her instincts urged her to tread cautiously. This envelope could contain a clue, a potential motive, or insight into Lila's complicated life. With gloved hands, she placed it into an evidence bag, her heart racing with the possibilities it held. As the forensics team continued collecting hair samples and fingerprints from surfaces that hadn't been touched for weeks, Jenna's mind began to drift toward Lila's husband, Frank. There were whispers in the community about his temper, and the occasional argument reported by neighbors. Could he have been involved, or was there another shadow lurking nearby, pushing Lila into a corner? Questions loomed heavy as the crime scene unfolded before her. Orchestrated chaos was masked by an ordinary setting, and Jenna understood that to uncover the truth, she would need to peel back the layers both of the crime scene and of the troubled life Lila had lived. As evening descended, she resolved to dig deeper, knowing that one answer could lead to the unraveling of much more than she ever anticipated. The early investigation. The following day, as a fine mist clung to the air in Maplewood, the investigation shifted into high gear. Officer Jenna Reed convened with her partner, Detective Mark Fernandez, in the cramped confines of the precinct. Coffee cups sat forgotten atop the cluttered desk, steam rising like the tension they felt in the room. With Lila Watson's death casting a long shadow over the town, they needed every detail to build a case. Start with the basics, Jenna instructed, her pen poised over a legal pad. We'll need to interview family members, friends, anyone who might have seen or spoken to her recently. We needed a timeline. Detective Fernandez nodded, his brow furrowing as he reviewed the initial reports. I'll reach out to Frank Watson first. He's probably going to be our best bet for information. Also, we need to talk to the kids, see where they were, and if they noticed anything unusual in the lead-up to her death. As calls began to fill the precinct, Jenna turned her attention to the sealed envelope they had retrieved. With a palpable sense of anticipation, she followed a hunch and requested the envelope be opened for examination. Inside, she discovered a series of letters exchanged between Lila and an unknown correspondent. Their contents hinted at emotional turmoil, fears of infidelity, a deteriorating marriage, and mentions of a secret that Lila had been wrestling with. Frank isn't going to like this, she murmured to herself, heart racing at the implications. The letters indicated that Lila was entangled in something troubling, far beyond mere domestic discord. Meanwhile, Fernandez had established contact with Frank. They arranged to meet that afternoon at the diner, where Frank often held court with the locals. Jenna arrived at the diner, the atmosphere charged with whispered speculation. She spotted Frank at a booth in the corner, his back hunched as he stared absently at the coffee in front of him. Frank looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and puffy. It was clear that grief had taken its toll, but Jenna also noted a flicker of something Elsian, underlying tension that sparked her curiosity. "Thank you for coming in. I know this is difficult," she began, her voice calm and steady. "We need to talk about Lila." As the words hung between them, Jenna braced herself for the emotional storm that would follow, hoping it would lead to the answers they so desperately sought. With every question, the investigation would inch closer to unveiling the truth hand, the secrets that had festered within the shadows of the Watson household. The dead ends. The days rolled on. The investigation slowly morphing into a labyrinth of unanswered questions and elusive lead. Officer Jenna Reed, driven by a relentless need for clarity, found herself tangled in the complexity of broken relationships and half-truths. With each interview, it seemed a new dead end presented itself, leaving them more perplexed than before. Frank Watson's demeanor at the diner had been a curious mix of sorrow and anger. He spoke of his wife in hushed tones, including a torrent of regret regarding their fading relationship. "We had our issues," he admitted, his voice quivering. "But I loved her. I never would have," he paused, his eyes darkening. "I could never hurt her." Jenna had observed a slight tremor in Frank's hands as he spoke. It was an unsettling sign. Grief was one thing, but the guilt that flickered behind his eyes whispered of secrets held too tightly. However, when the police dug through his alibis and interviews with co-workers, Frank's story seemed consistent. He had been at work throughout the day Lila was killed, and there were witnesses to confirm his whereabouts. Next, they spoke with the couple's children, Maya, the eldest, who had recently moved to the city, and Jake, a college student still living at home. Both were devastated, offering their condolences, but no significant insights into what might have led to their mother's death. As Jenna sifted through their interviews, it became clear that Lila had maintained a distance from them, even if their love remained real. And then there were the letters. They didn't reveal the identity of the correspondent, but hinted at a connection that suggested danger was lurking just outside the boundaries of Lila's already troubled life. The forensics report discovered no fingerprints beyond her own, adding another layer of frustration as Jenna pondered who could have sent those notes without leaving a trace. Even the neighbors yielded little information. Many mentioned odd noises coming from the Watson home recently. Some speculated about arguments, while others simply shrugged, citing their own hustle and bustle as a reason for not paying closer attention. A week had passed, and the closer they pushed for answers, the more obstacles emerged. Jenna slammed her pen onto the desk in frustration, knowing they were no closer to unraveling the truth behind Lila's death. She could sense the pressure mounting not just from her superiors, but from a community eager to see justice served. With roads converging into a wall of silence, Jenna understood that this case would demand every ounce of patience and perseverance she possessed. Time was running out, and with every tick of the clock, the edges of the mystery blurred further into shadows. A break in the case. On the 8th day following Lila Watson's death, a breakthrough arrived in the form of an unexpected tip. The call came through to Officer Jenna Reed, just as she was leaving the precinct, their exhaustion palpable as she fumbled for her keys. The voice on the other end belonged to Adam Reed, a local mechanic and part-time private investigator, who claimed he had information crucial to the case. "Jenna, it's Adam," he began, urgency woven into his tone. "I've heard some things about Lila's last days. You should come by the garage." Curiosity piqued, Jenna hurried to the hardware district, the flickering neon lights casting shadows across the pavement. When she stepped into the garage, the scent of motor oil and gasoline was a sharp contrast to the stories she had been sifting through. Adam was leaning against a workbench, his brow furrowed with concern. "I don't know how to say this easily, but Lila's in trouble," he stated, the words heavy with implication. "A few weeks back, she was frantic. She was frantic. She wanted her car checked out. Said it was acting strange. At the time, I thought it was just a mechanical issue, but he trailed off, glancing toward the door as if checking for eavesdroppers." What did she say?" Jenna pressed, her heart racing at the hint of urgency that lingered in his word. Adam swallowed hard. She mentioned someone following her. A man, she didn't know his name, but she claimed he was menacing. She thought he might be connected to her husband's work somehow. "I thought she was just stressed. I had no idea it was serious." Jenna's mind raced. There had been hints of an outside threat in the letters, but hearing it from someone who witnessed Lila's desperation solidified the fear that enshrouded the investigation. "Do you have any idea who this person might be?" Adam shook his head, a look of regret washing over his face. "No, but she was terrified. Whatever connection she had with him, it was dangerous." While Adam provided the first real lead, there was no name, no clearer path to follow, just fragments. Jenna knew this was the turning point they had desperately longed for, yet the murkiness still lingered. As she drove back to the precinct, her mind raced with possibilities. Someone had threatened Lila, but why? And were those whispers of danger the catalyst for her tragic end? Without concrete evidence, though, weaving a narrative from mere threads of information was going to take diligence and ingenuity. This was the moment Jenna had been waiting for, but it came with a chilling reminder that the shadows still loomed large, and with them, the very real potential of unseen threats still lurking in Maplewood. The suspect. With a new lead from Adam Reed echoing in her thoughts, Officer Jenna Reed wasted no time diving deeper into Lila Watson's life. The mere suggestion of a menacing figure lurking in the periphery ignited a fire within her, compelling her to chase a trail that seemed both dangerous and elusive. She knew one thing: their focus needed to shift. Jenna decided to start with Lila's husband, Frank, who had been relatively cooperative up to this point. While his alibi held up in the estimation of the police, something about his demeanor nagged at Jenna's instincts. A small word, a flicker of irritation at the mention of his wife's concerns. She needed to redraw her focus and scrutinize him closely. Arranged in a small conference room at the precinct, Frank sat across from Jenna, his hands clasped tightly together. As she glanced at the notes she had made during previous interviews, a plan began to form. "Frank," Jenna began, her tone measured, "I've received some information suggesting Lila felt threatened. It's crucial that we understand her situation completely. Can you tell me more about her life in the weeks leading up to her death?" Frank blinked, taking a moment to process her words. "You don't know what to say. Lila was upset about a lot of things, but we were working on it. I honestly don't know who would be threatening her," he stammered, the shaky edge in his voice betraying a crack in his otherwise resolved facade. Jenna pressed further, leaning in slightly. "Was there someone at your work? Did Lila ever mention a name?" Frank's pause was excruciating, his brow furrowing as he wrestled with his thoughts. "Not at work, but there's someone. An old friend of mine, Steve. He had some issues in the past. We lost touch, but Lila thought he was dangerous." The name resonated in Jenna's mind. Steve Connors was a former co-worker of Frank's, a man with a troubled history that included a record for intimidation and harassment. It was the kind of name that could fit the shadow she had envisioned. As she dug deeper into Steve's background, magistrate records revealed a tumultuous past marred by violence. In the weeks leading up to Lila's death, he had been spotted around town, rekindling old acquaintances, leading Jenna to wonder if his presence, however benign it might appear, had a darker undertone. By connecting the dots, Jenna felt they were inching ever closer to uncovering the truth. If Steve had crossed paths with Lila, perhaps her fears were warranted, and the threads of her life had become dangerously intertwined with someone who could very well be her undoing. With renewed energy, Jenna organized a team to bring Steve in for questioning, understanding the urgency of the matter. As she prepared her notes and gathered the evidence they had accrued, she realized that the time for speculation was over. It was time to turn shadows into lights and confront the specter that loomed over Maplewood that had woven itself into Lila's tragic tale. The trial. The air outside the Maplewood courthouse was electric, a charged atmosphere fueled by anticipation and anxiety. It had been months since Lila Watson's death, and now, finally, the case was being heard before a judge. Officer Jenna Reed could feel the weight of scrutiny on her shoulders as she stepped through the double doors, her heart pounding with a mix of determination and dread. This was the moment all their efforts had led to. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Friends and family of both the Watsons and the accused filled the benches, their expressions ranging from grief to anger. Frank sat with his head bowed, a shadow of the man Jenna had once met, while Steve Connors appeared oddly calm, a stark contrast to the turmoil his alleged actions had wrought. The defenses had painted him as an old friend, wrongfully accused. Yet behind that mask lay a man revered in the community for his charm, but feared for his past. As the trial began, the prosecutor meticulously laid out the evidence. Jenna sat in the front row, her notes crisp and clear, detailing every interaction and nuance that had emerged since that dreadful day. She listened intently, recalling every interview with panicked desperation in Lila's voice, Frank's volatile reactions, the chilling connection to Steve. Jenna's mind raced as witnesses were called. First came Lila's co-workers, who spoke of her fear and unease in the weeks leading up to her death. They corroborated the warnings she had shared about feeling watched, about a looming presence that had caused her distress. Each testimony tightened the noose around Steve's neck, drawing the jury's attention to the pattern of behavior that had escalated to violence. And it was time for Steve to take the stand. With a confident smirk, he delivered his version of events, claiming that he hadn't seen Lila in years, He described a series of coincidences, insisting he had been unfairly targeted solely because of his past. As he spoke, Jenna could see the jury's ambivalence. Fear radiated from the witnesses who had crossed paths with him. As the trial progressed, the defense tried to shift their focus to Frank, suggesting jealousy obscured his judgment, and that he could very well have been the one to orchestrate Lila's demise. Jenna's stomach turned at the prospect, but she refused to let the imagination spiral. Climax came when the prosecution introduced the sealed letters found in Lila's study. As those revealing words filled the courtroom, depicting an escalating fear and an intimate knowledge of her life from the perspective of someone set on destruction, the atmosphere grew dense with tension. When the deliberations began, it felt as though time stood still. Jenna fixed her gaze on the jury as they filed back into the room, each step echoing like a drumbeat against her heart. She held her breath as the foreman rose to deliver the verdict. "Guilty," he announced, and for a moment silence enveloped the court until it erupted into a cacophony of murmurs and gasps. Jenna sighed with relief as the reality sunk in. Justice had prevailed for Lila Watson, a woman whose life had been cut tragically short, her truths buried beneath layers of deception. The community could begin to heal, but Jenna knew their scars would remain. As the courtroom cleared, Jenna felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her. A tumultuous end to a long chapter. She had fought not just for Lila, but for those who still grieved, for the shadows that lingered. And while Maplewood would carry its burden, she was grateful to have cast a bit of light into the darkness. The aftermath. In the weeks following the trial, Maplewood struggled to find its footing. The verdict against Steve Connors had sent ripples through the community, a tempest that seemed to stir the very foundation of trust among its residents. Grief mingled with relief. As people grappled with the reality of what had transpired and the secrets it had unearthed, Officer Jenna Reed returned to her regular duties, but the weight of Lila's case lingered in her conscience. The routine tasks felt trivial in the shadow of a life lost and a community fractured. She often found herself in conversations that were tinged with the echoes of Lila's story neighbors discussing safety and surveillance, mothers teaching their children to be wary of strangers. With time, Jenna sought to redirect the pain into purpose. She initiated a community forum on personal safety, drawing citizens together to share their experiences and reinforce bonds that had grown tenuous. They discussed strategies for looking after one another, using Lila's tragedy as a catalyst for change. It was a challenging journey, but in the vulnerable moments, there were glimpses of growth as people united for a common cause. But healing was not universal. Frank struggled to navigate the aftermath of his wife's death and the public perception that shadowed him. While some offered sympathy, others treated him as a pariah, unable to disentangle his connection to Steve from their shared history. He wrestled with resentment and sorrow, his shoulders heavy under the burden of guilt he could not shake. Guilt for not saving Lila before it was too late. As the days stretched into weeks, Jenna took it upon herself to check on Frank periodically, recognizing that his isolation was a prison of its own making. She found him sitting alone in his distraught home, the echoes of laughter drowned out by silence. "I didn't protect her," he admitted, tears glistening in his eyes. I should have done something. Jenna kneeled beside him, a wave of empathy surging through her. You loved her, Frank. This wasn't your fault, she reminded him. But we can honor her memory by making sure this doesn't happen again, not to anyone. One evening, drawn by a thought that had flickered through her mind, Jenna returned to the garage where Adam worked. As she entered, she saw tools scattered chaotically across the bench, but amidst the clutter, there was potential for healing. Lila had been vibrant, engaged in her community, a brief candle that had been extinguished, but whose light could guide future efforts. We need a neighborhood watch, Jenna proposed, energized by the idea. It's time to mobilize. Adam nodded enthusiastically. Let's do it. The more involved we can get people, the safer we all will be. As they organized meetings, recruited volunteers, and worked to mend the tears in the fabric of community life, Jenna felt a shift. They were transforming loss into vigilance, pain into unity. With every small victory, it became clear that while scars might never completely fade, the memory of Lila Watson would become a catalyst for change, ensuring that no other family would endure the heartbreak of her story. In the aftermath of tragedy, Maplewood began to breathe again. The path to healing was winding, but Jenna knew they were moving forward together, drawn by the shared desire for safety, connection, and ultimately, justice served not just for Lila, but for the enduring spirit of every life lost too soon. Reflection. As the autumn leaves began to fall, Jenna Reed found herself standing on the porch of the Watson home. The once vibrant exterior now dulled by time, but still echoing with memories. Each crack in the wood reminded her of the life that once thrived within its walls. Despite the community's efforts to rebuild and honor Lila's legacy, the haunting specter of loss clung to the air like a lingering fog. In the quiet moments, Jenna contemplated the complexities of justice and healing. She had come to realize that while the trial had addressed the question of culpability, it could never fill the void left in the hearts of those who loved Lila. The community's vigilance was a start, yet it was imbued with the weight of sorrow, a testimony to the fragility of life. Sitting on the porch steps, she recalled the flicker of hope in Frank's eyes when they spoke of Lila's memory transforming into action. It was a reminder that every loss had the potential to inspire change, and in their collective grief, they could forge a path to a safer future. Jenna understood that her role as an officer extended beyond apprehending the guilty. It encompassed nurturing the wounded, offering solace, and encouraging resilience among those left behind. She was no longer just a seeker of justice. She was now a guardian of the shared narrative, a storyteller weaving together the threads of loss and renewal. As dusk settled over Maplewood, Jenna felt a sense of calm spread over her. There was still much work to be done, but in the shared echoes of laughter, the community could find solace amid sorrow. They had become a collective force against darkness, illuminating the way forward for others who would walk the same path. In reflection, Jenna knew every heartbeat mattered, every voice amplified hope, and together they would carry Lila's legacy into the light.